And welcome to a special Yuletide edition of Archive Thrifting, designed to put you into the holiday spirit, whether you like it or not. Anyway, I think I can safely say that I've been doing this long enough now to where I can call it an archive land tradition. And as such, I've got a perfectly traditional archive Christmas thrifting adventure to unload on you here. So, as always, first up, we're going to hit up the annual special Christmas edition of the Benson's Flea Market, which takes place the first weekend after Halloween. What Thanksgiving? And we'll also hit up Savers as well. But between the two, I've got about 20 minutes worth of footage, so it's going to be just those two this time around. Anyway, I should note here that even by archive Christmas thrifting standards, there's a lot of Christmas junk this time around. I mean, there's plenty of everyday stuff, and this one is admittedly going to be on the music heavy side, but just something to be aware of this time around. So anyway, let's fire up the old unleaded 87 octane sleigh and go buy some crap. I swear, years from now, I'm going to cut together these establishing shots at the fairgrounds and track the progress of the rust. Kind of like how some parents mark their kids' height on the wall on their birthday every year. But, yep, my rust looks good. Cycle medics parking only. Ah, yes, from the failed motorcycle ambulance service. Anyway, there's one for the Santa who just saw Jesus file, and a truly lit flamingo. I wish I had the space for that on my little set. The flamingo, that is. Saw a whole stack of late 50s, early 60s celeb magazines. Nice to know they've been tawdry for a long time. But alas, I could not find the article about Connie Francis and her father. But I got to read all about Roger Smith's 24 Hours of Amnesia, though, or as they call it these days, Saturday. Otherwise, a bit of prophecy about Rock Hudson. And I guess Debbie Reynolds tried to kill Eddie Fisher. From what I've heard about him, that sounds about right. Anyway, audio cassettes, $2 a piece. And they've got my personal favorite Beatles compilation in there, which I already have on CD and vinyl, and, well, I guess I have it on cassette now, too. Otherwise, a Beatles album you don't see a whole lot. Beatles 6 from 1965, but I've already got the better UK equivalents. And Spinal Tap's Black Album, best metal album ever made, original issue no less. Anyway, if this Birds album is anything to go by, $5 is way overpriced. And of course, the disc was trashed. Now, I would happily pay $5 for one in decent shape. But otherwise, this Tim Buckley album, Jeff's dad for you youngins, fooled me for the longest time. It always looked like someone gave him a black eye, but no, it's just a cute photography trick. Otherwise, it's stuff that I already have, or if I wanted it at all, I would only pay thrift store prices for. Very early Seals and Crofts album there, which I would take on CD in a heartbeat. And that's not the last of Ricky Nelson we're going to see today. Otherwise, again, stuff I might pay thrift store prices for, but that's about it. Now here's the dollar bin, and it's mostly the usual stuff. Tom Rush. I've actually been starting to hear him again periodically. And a word to record flippers, don't leave the price that you paid for it on the sleeve. It just makes you look like that much more of a dick. Anyway, I did find one album, Winter Wonderland by The Brass Band. Now, at the time, I was still gathering Christmas candidates, since determined, but I did pick it up, and it is cheese-orific. Everybody and their damn dog was in the main video game booth, making it extra hard for me to get a shot of that Atari Jaguar back there at $375. Isn't the survival rate of those things especially poor? In a different booth, a stray Sega Game Gear at $85, which even though I would have to send it off for restoration and modding, I would have paid that $85 for just such a complete package. Alas, the person immediately ahead of me bought it, and they just run off to the ATM for the cash to pay for it. Dang, I really wanted one of those as a kid. Otherwise, some semi-interesting handhelds, Missile Command, Mattel Football, and an asteroids game that's been apparently beaten by actual asteroids. And the hunt continues for a piece of Christmas decor that's even more terrifying than my evil wooden drag queen Santa. But the best I could do is this plastic talking deal, which I think we saw a different one of a year or two ago. Yeah, something tells me that I'm stuck with the evil wooden drag queen Santa for the rest of my life. Well, I'd like to think we have a little, if only tangential, drive-in cred in archive land. And since cup holders evidently hadn't been invented yet, I could see something like this. But the joke was on me. They are just hacked off muffin tins. Well, that'll keep your Happy Days board game nice and fresh. And the Godfather game? It kind of makes me wish there were some other, kind of mid-level YouTubers around here. We could have a gaming session and post it. Why, it'd be bonkers! No, you are not seeing things. They really wanted $135 for freaking Rock'em Sock'em Robots. Otherwise, if I ever move over to it, we've got what looks like an overly complicated version of Battleship, or learning to manage a parking garage or something. I'm really not sure. Well, here's your daily reminder that grime doesn't pay. This would have made my younger self weak in the knees. I was a big-time Garfield kind of kid. Yeah, screw the superheroes. I was all about a snarky, hyper-domesticated cat. Anyway, we've got what appears to be a wind-up toy here, which I would have loved 30 years ago. And funnily enough, that is about what I look like in the mornings. Otherwise, a Garfield phone, and I would have loved that too once upon a time. So, did the eyes open and close on this thing? Nope. Does the nose double as a button? No, of course not. Anyway, there was one true bit of nostalgia in here for me. I really did have that Garfield handheld massager. As I recall, it was pretty weak and it died on me after a few uses. Made a lot of racket, too. Found a couple of old, I think, rim drive tape recorders, like you used to be able to pick up at the hardware store for like $20 or so some 60 years ago. Of course, these things are mostly, if not all, transistorized, and those transistors are probably shot at this point, and you probably can't get replacements, but yeah, $22 for that one. Now, as for the other one, whenever I finally panned down to it, I was sorely tempted by that one, largely for the mystery reel of tape on it, which has probably been sitting there since the 60s. In the end, I just couldn't justify $22-ish for a mystery reel of tape that may very well disintegrate on me. Otherwise, they had a very basic General Electric CB radio. And back in there, we've got a G.I. Joe radio and a probably 60s transistor radio from Westinghouse. Oh yeah, I also found a novelty battery-operated monster book, which of course isn't even a book, and I seriously doubt it worked anymore. Okay, more Christmas junk. Of course, a few years back, I cold opened the annual Christmas episode with a segment with a battery-powered bell-ringing Santa, somewhat like this one, that was shedding horribly, and it was a lot of fun. This one, alas, seemed to be in much better shape, and not shedding, and as such, nowhere near as fun. Apologies, I kinda had to conceal my phone here. Anyway, don't get excited. These posters are almost entirely reproductions, and not terribly good ones. And of course, this type of poster wasn't even really a thing anymore by the time, say, 1992 rolled around, and some of this is later than that. But I guess at least the old ticket stubs attached to some of them are legit. Maybe. Well, I can picture Emmylou Harris playing this guitar. And, oh, hey, this guitar is stealing Santa's parking spot. Bastard. Anyway, does this thing sound decent?
No.
Yeah, decent enough. Whatever. And the rather underwhelming haul from the flea market consists of the Brass Band's Winter Wonderland album. This is the kind of album that makes you want to smoke a pack of Luckies and crack open a Ballantine. Otherwise, 2 audio cassettes, the Beatles Blue 1967-70 compilation, of which the pressure pad needs reattached, and an album that I'm totally not worthy of, the Spinal Tap soundtrack. First snow of the season when I shot this, and yes, we're at Savers, which looks uncharacteristically festive today. Must be the snow. Now, initially I thought Scott Adams had licensed the Elbonian characters from his Dilbert comics for merchandising, but no. Apparently, these are just supposed to be gnomes, and apparently it's a whole trend that I missed entirely. Jesus is dear to me? He's venison to you? That sounds a bit disrespectful. Anyway, a slightly unnerving Santa totem there. It makes it look like the animals are hiding under his clothes. And just like Halloween, the seasonal media section continues to dwindle. Anyway, we've got a little of note. Merry Arizona 97, which appears to be a compilation of existing stuff. Otherwise, Redneck Christmas. Yeah, well, that looks a little recent for archive, 2012, and it appears to still be available for download and streaming. And I've got a few of those kind of quasi-hick Christmas albums, and I haven't found a particularly noteworthy one yet. Otherwise, St. Dismas Christmas, the Prisoner Choir, I believe. Not that it matters, the disc was missing, you might say it escaped. And Kenny Loggins, where is your beard? Otherwise, oh, this is just depressing. A few stray holiday 45s back there, all of which appear to be kiddie records on the Cricket label. No thanks. And the cassettes appear to be every bit as underwhelming as the CDs and 45s. About as noteworthy as it got was Christmas with the 50 Guitars, which, if it were 50 guitars all at once, I might care, but I'd be willing to bet there aren't 50 guitar parts spread out throughout the entire album. Well, there's one for the ladies. Geez, even Christmas can't escape the cheap, tawdry dime store novel treatment. I've never heard of any of these authors. Anyway, below that, we do have a little stash of Christmas VHS, a fairly early issue of White Christmas, dating to about 1985, and I've got that movie on Philips CDI, and I should really watch it sometime. I've actually never seen that one all the way through. Anyway, there is another copy back there from slightly later, probably 87 or so. Now, this seems strange. Home for Christmas on the Rhino video label, which just seems really dull for them. But otherwise, never cared much for the Snowman. I actually kind of prefer the parodies. And a colorized version of It's a Wonderful Life. And yeah, that'll totally make that dirge of a movie more lively. Anyway, in the regular CDs, how often do you see the raspberries in the thrift store bin? Now, I've already got the Capitol Collector's Greatest Hits, which has all of these songs plus 6 more, so I'll leave this for someone else. Otherwise, I've already got Barry White's Greatest Hits. Now, I did not pick this up when it first came out. Leonard Cohen's final proper album, You Want It Darker, and it was in excellent shape. Yeah, I picked it up. Otherwise, if I ever pick it up, we have run into this next one before. The Jordanaires taking a then new stab at some Christmas stuff made most famous, kinda sorta, by Elvis Presley. Now, for some reason, Savers wanted $4 for this rather beaten copy of Bob Marley's Naughty Dread, which, as it turned out, the disc was even more beaten than the case. And I probably would have grabbed it if it were in good shape, even at that price. Now, Loretta Lynn had just died less than a month before, but yeah, that is no excuse to jack up the price of Van Leer Rose up to $5, and I've already got that one anyway. Well, we got another oldies but goodies compilation here, and I've already got everything I would want off of that one, so I'll leave that for someone else. In the cassettes, a very enticing looking amateur album, still sealed, from Nicole. Just Nicole. I got news for you, not everybody can be Cher. But yeah, I gotta hear this one. Otherwise, Rachel's Song, just the one apparently, purchased at Hill City Music in Minneapolis, which seems to be long gone. It looks like just some dull classical thing anyway, so yeah, I passed. This Connie Vanett 45 is already on YouTube with 400,000 plus hits, thanks to some John Waters ties. Alas, it's not funny, nor is it innuendo-laden. Otherwise, there were some surprises in the 45s, and I normally don't do 45s, but yeah, one from Solomon Burke. And of course, Daddy Dewdrop's legendary slab of early 70s AM radio cheese, Chickaboom, Don't You Just Love It, which I've already got on at least a couple of hits of the 70s albums. Now, how often do you see John Zachary 45s in the thrift store bin? Now, this thing is absolutely filthy, but it doesn't look too beaten up. And for 69 cents, damn right I'm picking up this one. Now, I had to wait an eternity to look at the records here, because some genius was sitting here checking each album to see what they were fetching on Fleabay, and left the section totally trashed. So even though it's not my job, I cleaned it up and cherry-picked a few noteworthy discs. Now, I only purchased about half of this stack. Find out which ones later. Anyway, an early and rather unremarkable Everly Brothers album. No hits on this one, and no originals either. Behind that is a copy of Here Comes Huckleberry Hound, which has been taped back together, and unsurprisingly, the disc is pretty well trashed. And it's just a raspberries kind of day. Now, I've already got this one in better condition, but yeah, you just don't normally see the raspberries in the thrift store bin. Behind that, we've got one of Buddy Hackett's stand-up albums, which I fear is nowhere near as fun as his nightclub act was in person. We got a promo copy of one of Paul Williams' later albums, and I actually have a good chunk of his stuff already. One of Jimmy Durante's albums for Warner Brothers during the 60s, which are kind of endearing. I would have been all over this Supremes album, but it was trashed. Some relatively early Paul Revere and the Raiders, Mae West and W.C. Fields, some bits from their movies, but weirdly none of their joint material. Boxcar Willie, which I already have on cassette, a very early Ricky Nelson greatest hits, and lastly, Bob and Ray on a Platter. Hardy har har. Title notwithstanding, usually their stuff is pretty dry humor. But yes, true to my word, I cleaned up the vinyl section. Along with the snow, the wind really picked up here. Anyway, the haul from Savers consists of a cassette from Nicole, strictly country, I'll be the judge of that one, 2 CDs, Leonard Cohen's You Want It Darker, and the second of Joe Cocker's late 80s comeback albums. On vinyl, we got Buddy Hackett's first stand-up album, we've got a 45 from John Zachary, The Cool Ghoul, Monsters Have Problems Too. Paul Williams, A Little Bit of Love. Paul Revere and the Raiders, below that, Revolution. And then we've got Mae West and W.C. Fields side by side, but only in the vinyl sense. A very, very early greatest hits from Ricky Nelson. And lastly, Bob and Ray on a Platter. And the final haul for this episode consists of, from Benson's Flea Market, Winter Wonderland from the Brass Band. And we'll end with a bit of that if the YouTube gods will allow it. And 2 cassettes from 2 of the greatest bands of all time, the Beatles and, more importantly, Spinal Tap. From Savers, we've got 7 slabs of vinyl from Bob and Ray, Buddy Hackett, Paul Williams, Swan himself, Paul Revere and the Raiders, Ricky Nelson, Mae West and W.C. Fields, and of course, and as it turns out pretty rare, 45 from John Zachary. We've got 2 CDs, Leonard Cohen's You Want It Darker from 2016, and Joe Cocker's One Night of Sin from 1989. And lastly, 1 cassette from Nicole, just Nicole, strictly country. And the cost of this haul came out to about $27. And that's it for this installment of Archive Thrifting. Next week will be this year's Christmas special. I'll talk to you then.